And let's record this to the cloud. And beautiful. We have a live stream link as well. Yes, it's the initial logistics and then we're ready to go.
Absolutely. So we start at 11, right?
Yeah. 11, okay. 11:05.
Okay. And Ganesh speaks at 12, is it?
Yeah, he's doing the how to be viral in a pandemic, TEDx guidelines, best practices. So he's got some material ready on it.
Mm-hmm. Dude, I was thinking the same. He should have gone, before me so that I can take up a few tips. But nevertheless.
Yeah, no, it's all good. I mean, you're very articulate. You have your own style. But he spent time understanding the narrative of a typical good TEDx talk, and he's broken it into a couple of steps, and he's put it into a way where he's saying, hey, let's help our speakers also just not just do soundboards, but also guide them on how to form a narrative. It's a very good idea.
Yeah.
It's waiting room will just pile up now. One more thing to find.
Hey, Adi, hi.
Hey, Rohan.
Hey, Rohan. What's up? How are you?
I'm great. How are you?
Doing great, man. Nice to see you here.
Yes. I could not have missed this, obviously.
I think you'll be featured today, so look out for that.
Oh, is it? Nice.
Aditya, I'm just doing 2 more minutes of logistics, but totally can have you screen share in the meantime. And
sure.
Quick 30-second intro and then over to you.
Okay, perfect.
Hi, good morning, Aditya.
Hi guys, what's up? Good morning.
Hi Arjun. Hi everyone. Good morning.
Hi, Anirudh. Yeah, looking forward to your talk.
Yeah, it's going to be so exciting. Content.
Thanks for the build-up for sure. Yeah, I'm super excited as well, man. Speaking to the Mafia and everyone involved in the community.
This is also being live streamed, so just resharing that link here. I'm going to throw it out in some groups. Right, we'll start in 2 minutes. Sharp.
Perfect.
Great, let's kick it off. Aditya, you ready?
Absolutely.
Fab. Good morning, everyone, and thank you for being here for SusTalks number 25. We've made it to the silver jubilee of our SusTalks. It started, I think, a year ago, more than a year ago. And we've tried to not keep it every weekend, but as frequently as we'd like it, just get great conversations and great stories out there. Aditya is a great 25th SusTalk host because he's been at this for what, 4 years now, 5 years? The climate space,
4 years.
Space.
Yeah.
And he's actually one of the youngest members of SusMafia as a mafioso. Super inspiring to have just such young blood, like building so hungry in such a hungry manner, such a quality organization that's had tremendous environmental impact, social impact, and economic impact. I'm personally very inspired by Aditya. I think a lot of people in SusMafia have a lot more to learn from Aditya as well. And today we're going to go through his climate journey and how he has helped power 100,000 homes without installing a single solar panel. It's a very fascinating story. We're going to have this roll out for the next 20 minutes. And then we'll follow it up with a Q&A with me for about 15 minutes. And then we'll lean into an open Q&A with everybody who's on this call as well. So Aditya, over to you for SusTalks number 25.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Anirudh, for the kind words. And I'm equally inspired with you and your new organization. And thanks everyone for joining in. Good morning. It's a pleasure to have you guys share some time with me, knowing about our journey and the work which we've done, right? So today's talk is probably going to be a bit more personal so that you can peek into how we started off, all the thoughts before we started off, right? And our current impact after that. So yeah, I hope you'd love to learn about our personal journey, right? So I would start off with the earliest phase, right? This was back in college where I think I was quite curious, into technology. We had a group where we built out these drones, robots. You see some fancy machinery here, which was, I think, earliest version of an airplane which can also fly like a drone and transition midair, right? We did try our best. I think it became an eventual flop, I think, but the learning which went behind it and just seeing one successful flight of how it could fly like a drone and then transition was just awesome, right? So I think my early days back in college was mostly spent, especially late evenings, working with robotics, IoT, drones, a lot of these things. And while on the weekends, I was involved in NCC, right? So I did a lot of volunteering activities regarding defense, etc. So I think there was somewhere a mix of both, which is technology and some source of purpose, right? And some source of impact, essentially, which I could look at. So this led to our first project in college, which started out just as a casual project, honestly, not really academical project, but a pet project of me and a couple of our friends, which was basically called, Hope. So essentially, we built out an application which was like book my show for, let's say, volunteers and NGOs, right? So you could easily choose what sort of, events or activities you'd want to take part in, be it environmental, health related, women centric, or anything else, right? Based on certain themes. Because we realized in Bangalore, there was a infuse of a lot of students and workers every year, and some of them did want to try out these social activities, but they did not know how to really organize it, where to go, whom to meet, right? So we tried building an application to do this, which was again a combination of technology and hopefully creating some impact. And once we tried this out, I think we went wrong in a particular phase where we never thought how to really sustain this or to monetize it, because the mentality was always about a pet project, right? So we never cared about that. So this was our first solid failure eventually, which led me to realize that ideally I would want to be part of an organization or build an organization which has a scalable business model, but also creates a humongous impact, right? So that was the genesis of the thought of wanting to try something on my own, especially after realizing the amount of personal growth and satisfaction we got after trying to build this in real life, right? So this basically led to a lot of conversations with different people, where I think I was pretty clear that I would love to build an organization right out of college and take a bet on that. And hopefully technology being a central piece and creating a lot of impact, right? And essentially, I used to meet Ganesh and Kaustubh quite a lot, who eventually became my co-founders. This was me in college being a student, where they had put out a stall, exhibiting their technology in our college. And the photo on the right is essentially on the day we decided that we as a team would try building a solution. So Ganesh and Kaustubh had been at it in the solar domain for a couple of years, where they were trying to build monitoring systems for these large-scale solar PV plants. And then I had a background in drones, robotics, especially drones. I think had done quite a lot of work, right from building the electronics behind it to actually helping build the mechanical structures, and also be the head of sponsorship at some point in time. So I had like sort of like all-round experience in terms of how the drone ecosystem is evolving across the world, right? So with the combination of these two, we thought, why not look at the solar sector to come up with these challenges and try solving some of them if we are able to identify how technology can create impact, right? That is how we started thinking about our idea, which is here what you see is essentially the amount of installed capacity of solar across the world. So this is historical data, where by end of 2020, you had around 770 gigawatts of solar installed across the world. Right. And then we are forecasted to hit more than a terawatt somewhere between 2023, and then go up to 1.5 terawatt to around 2 gigawatts or 2 terawatt essentially of solar PV in the most ambitious case, right? Now, the big challenge with so much installation of solar power across the world comes across multiple different places. The first one is obviously, where do you install so much solar? How do we create the demand and make sure that we install quality assets, right? That's one. But also the second part, which we were pretty close to, because Ganesh and Kaustubh work very close with respect to operations of solar PV plants, is we realized that in large scale solar PV assets, there is unidentified replaceable losses of close to 1% in general, even in new assets, which could increase up to 3 to 5% in aging assets, right? Where anywhere around 5 years or more, we see around 3 to 5% of replaceable losses. Now that's a huge capacity. And how do we understand if it's huge or not is 1% of around 700 gigawatts is 7 gigawatts of solar. And by 2025, we're probably looking at around 21 gigawatts of just losses, which is massive right at source, right? So we've heard about solutions towards the consumers, towards the end, but there was a big gap right at source as well, which not a lot of people were really focusing on. Now, what is 7 gigawatts? Just to give you a comparative scale so that everyone probably understands how it could look like, I got a list out over here. So maybe not the most scientific data because it's based on Wikipedia, but just to give us a comparative. So if you look at it, this is basically the total capacity of solar installed in each of these countries. And there is just 15 countries which have more than 7 gigawatts of solar. And that is the loss at source per year, every year in solar, which is only going to increase, right? So there's just 15 countries with more solar than that. And if you look at overall electricity, I just put up a list where this is the total amount of electricity installed by end of 2018 across different countries. There's just around 75 countries which have more than 7 gigawatts of total power installed, right? So we are looking at a massive scale which could be changed if we are able to save this energy in whatsoever manner, right? In the best possible way. So this became our first focus area as a problem we'd like to solve, where we thought that if we save energy right at source, it is equivalent to not installing more capacity, but using the same power to generate and electrify, right? So that was the whole thesis of our idea when we started off, right? The second part, which we also had to notice in order to be able to achieve this, is you have a list of tariff, which is basically the amount of money which these solar asset owners make by selling single unit of electricity. So this is for large scale solar PV plants. The tariff does vary for smaller scale assets based on which region they are in. But if you look at the tariff across India, within 5 years from 2015 to 2020, it's more than halved. So the amount of price pressure in this market to be able to sustainably generate electricity and to maintain these assets for 25 years in order to be able to continue generating electricity in a profitable way is very high. It's a competitive market, and any solution which comes into play needs to be commercially viable right from day one in a big way, or you need to put in a lot of money behind it to be able to make it viable, right? So there is insane price pressure in this particular market. And the same trend is following across the world, where we are seeing cheaper and cheaper bids, which is also a great thing, right? Because solar electricity essentially became cheaper than coal at a particular point, and we're able to sustain it. So we quickly realized that we need a technological piece to make this continue and scale, where we could continue reducing the cost of operations and cost of producing electricity, and also make it more profitable for people who put out solar PV plants, right? So this became our core focus area. Now, looking at a few more challenges and how we really thought about the idea, is this is just one picture for you to understand how large solar PV is, right? So across kilometers, you just see a blue ocean of solar PV panels. In fact, I remember during our first trip to one of these assets, because for me, it was the first time, the driver had warned me that you would only see panels and electricity lines, and you'd not see any person at all. The number of panels and electricity lines totally outnumbered the amount of people we saw in that entire journey, right? So this is how a solar PV plant looks from a particular height. And you could see that across kilometers, you see the same. And in fact, this is one of the largest solar parks across the world and in India, which is in Bhadla in Rajasthan, right? So it's a completely deserted area, extremely high temperature, right? Not the best conditions to be working outdoors in order to, maintain these assets. Now, typically what happens? How do people perceive identifying these losses and fixing it? Is you have people probably go around these particular panels, trying to individually look at them, or what we call as a string, which is nothing but a group of panels over here. And they try identifying these issues across the PV plant. They also have a few monitoring devices at a broader scale, because it becomes impossible and not cost effective at all to put out sensors on individual panels, right? So they basically monitor it across a broader scale. Assume this area, which I'm probably pointing out for just understanding of a common man, after which they send out people to identify where these issues are located, right? And when we look at it from an infographical way, this is how it looks, right? You have group of segments where you have sensors monitoring the output of this data. And then you have people going around identifying these issues and fixing it. Now, the obvious challenges with this, when you look at a plant like this, is when you're monitoring such PV plants at a higher level, you would not be able to precisely identify the amount of losses and the root cause of losses and where they are located. So just think if your day-to-day job is to go to a big area like this and trying to identify where do I have a problem and what is the problem. Eventually the efficiency decreases. Eventually it's not a work which a lot of people want to do. And also it's not sustainable, especially when it rains a lot and when it's pretty hot, right? The temperatures around these places go up to 45 degrees sometimes in the summer, and there is quite a lot of loose as well, right? So it becomes very difficult to be able to do this. So we started thinking, because it's unsustainable to put in sensors across every panel, or let's say across a group of panels where it is good enough resolution to identify these issues and pinpoint their location, we thought, what if there could be a way where a single sensor could go around this entire large infrastructure and detect these issues and tell where it is located, right? And our way to do that was a combination of skills between all of our co-founders, essentially, which is we basically have broad level sensors recommending that there is an underperformance in the overall area. And then we would have a drone carrying a sensor around this area to identify these issues and hopefully let us know about the root cause of issues. How did this happen? We basically had thermal cameras and we had color cameras on these drones. And these drones would automatically move across this area, collecting different kinds of imagery. Once the imagery is collected, we have built our AI over time, which sort of looks at different patterns in these imageries to identify different issues. So typically, the way this principle works is solar panels basically heat up, or certain parts of the solar panels heat up if they are underperforming, right, compared to rest of the panel. So this could be spotted using thermal cameras, right? So just to give you a quick display of how it looks and what our AI sees, these are some thermal images and you see some root cause of issues, right? So I'm sure some of you would already be able to guess some of the root causes, right? So here you can see trees. These are basically trees which are causing shadows on these panels, right? And if you see, compared to these panels over here, the panels above are basically having a higher temperature, which is they're basically brighter. So this is what we basically try identifying using our AI. And because patterns for different root causes look different, our AI automatically classifies what is the kind of issue and where is this precisely located, right? So here you can also see some grass, which is causing shadow, right? So you have vegetation here, which is causing shadow. A quick show of how this looks in real life is it's probably one of this issue, right? So imagine walking around the entire infrastructure to trying to find it, versus we clearly saying that this is the location where you have this particular issue. Just go and do a greenkeeping activity, right? That is the amount of efficiency we're able to bring into the whole process while we save energy without having to install a single panel, right? So our core goal became slightly broader in terms of also addressing the operational efficiencies to make sure that these assets perform at the best level possible, right? So this is what we built out as a solution. And these are some other images which shows, let's say, panel level problems, which is basically manufacturing defects. Here we have something called as a diode for people involved in solar, right? If a diode is not functioning, this is how it appears, where a portion of the panel is underperforming, right? So these are different kinds of anomalies, and we are able to detect close to 15 to 18 different kinds of anomalies, so that the team on site does not really have to go there and identify root cause all the time, but they go with the right instruments to quickly go resolve it, to make sure the energy is back up in the fastest way possible, right? While making it efficient and cost effective. So that became our overall solution. And speaking about the impact since we have began, we have inspected 22 gigawatts across the last 3 years, where we commercially began operations after thinking about a ton of different ideas, working on some of them, failing at some of them. And the amount of energy we have saved right at source is close to 300 megawatts of solar PV, right? Which is massive because that capacity can easily power on an average urban home. It's around 100K urban homes, which is powered. And this is what we were able to achieve in the last 3 years. And we are already on track to do this every year. So we are on track to be able to inspect 20 to 25 gigawatts of solar every year from now on, right? So essentially, we'll be adding more and more power capacity back, which is offline or which is underperforming due to particular reasons, and hopefully generate that electricity and bring the impact which we're supposed to bring, right? I'd love to thank my colleague Rohan here, who inspired us to come up with these metrics in the first place. And I think this is what really motivates us to be able to put in this work and to grow more and more, right? Further evolving the solution, now we have become a slightly larger organization with broader goals. While our core focus remains on this impact, we're also trying to focus on how can we reduce the cost of electricity generated. How can we make life easier for a lot of these people who will get into generating solar, power, and make sure that they could do it in the most profitable way. And how we do it is we've built a completely digital platform where you can store not just the data from drones, but you can also get all the electrical measurements on site. So you can basically combine these data points, compare different solar plants in your whole portfolio so that you understand which is performing well, which is not. What is the root cause of issues? Is it the panels which we have procured? Is it the kind of operations and maintenance which we're doing? Is it the location related issues, right? So we are able to build out a lot of macro trends using that and identify and help these solar asset owners become a lot more profitable and operationally efficient, right? And then from there, we thought, why just focus on operations and maintenance? We have such huge installation capacity, right? We're going from anywhere around 700 gigawatts to close to 1.5 to 2 terawatts in the next few years. So why don't we focus in helping a lot of our customers identify which is the best location, best site to install more solar? How do you construct it? So we came up with different solutions which are basically oriented on software and helping people use software along with drones and other technologies. So we are able to help them identify the best sites to install. If there are threats due to, let's say, disasters, let's say there is a lot of flooding, I'm sure you might have seen that there are quite a lot of locations which undergo flooding due to rains. So if you do not do a proper survey of where to install solar PV plants, a lot of them could become dysfunctional, right? Which is becoming an increasing problem due to climate change itself, right? So we help in identifying these sites where you can put up the best solar capacity available. We help in making sure construction of solar is efficient and making sure it's done on time to be able to hit these targets, right? To make sure that teams are mobilized, there is enough manpower to be able to do that. We've built software for that. We've built software to be able to map out serial numbers of individual panels and digitize the entire solar assets. So our goal here is to make sure that we make the entire chain operationally efficient using software and make sure our customers can really focus on the work they need to do, which is to install more capacity to maintain them in the most cost-effective way so that the prices of solar can continue falling down, right? So that is our broader aspiration. And we're building technology based on software and drones and certain sensors to be able to tackle this whole problem statement, right? What is a broader goal in terms of company and as me as a person? One of the big things which we've observed is when a company has goals and metrics which they measure, which brings out real impact, the people involved in the company and the community and the broader community at large, they get motivated to get into these green initiatives. They get motivated to build things on their own. And that is a big inspiring factor for us. So in terms of the next few years, the way we are looking at our goals as a company and me as an individual, especially after working in solar, I think if I just go back a little bit, right, just sorry for taking it back. I told you I was a person who was probably technology centered first and then wanted to bring out impact. And that's how we arrived at this idea. But then working on this idea and this company changed the perspective completely. Today, what really matters to us after working with really nice colleagues and employees is how do we bring this impact? What is the end goal we need to focus on? and how do we probably use technology or even without technology to be able to achieve these goals, right? That has become a core part of personality. And I think similarly, a lot of employees see the same problem statement in a similar way. So looking at our next steps, our first goal is to scale our AI and GIS, which is basically geographic information system technologies, to other domains, where our low hanging fruit is we're going to expand beyond solar into other renewable energy assets. So there's equal amount of wind being installed, and wind has a similar problem in terms of identifying damages to making sure that they perform. And we're going to look at it and other energy infrastructure. We're also looking at a few places where it is regarding climate adaptation, right? So there's a lot of issues due to climate change, especially in the insurance space, be it in agriculture or in terms of damages in cities, etc., for disaster management, right? So we're looking at some of these domains very closely and thinking about how our technology could scale in some of these domains, which has become a good focus for us. Secondly, we're very keen to create a community of team members, which is inside the AirProbe organization, outside it as well, where I think SusMafia is doing such a great job. So I think we'll be a lot more involved. Me and my colleagues will be a lot more involved in SusMafia activity, because I think as we just told, right, the goal is to continue working on these problems which basically create a lot of impact and pull in a lot more people into these problems, right? Once we do that, we see each of them motivated and working towards better problem statements, bigger problem statements. And that's the only way we're really going to solve this climate problem, right? Which is the whole problem which we're really trying to solve. So I think building a community of team members working on these climate innovations is a big part and parcel of like our journey going ahead. And also we're looking to utilize our network of customers and partners to support scaling up some of these solutions, right? Which is one, internal to organization, and two, also to help other climate entrepreneurs hopefully scale the solutions up fast. And I think the sharing of resources, sharing of knowledge base with respect to what we've been able to achieve becomes very important, for which again, SusMafia is like a great platform for us to look at, right? So if I look at the next few years of my life and life at AirProbe, these are some of the things which we're focusing on. And on the commercial side of things, with also creating impact, we're looking at other renewable energy assets and to save a lot more energy, right? So if I just pull back before I stop the presentation, I think what we're really looking at in terms of solution is we have close to 2 terawatt being installed. So our technology basically has a capacity to probably look at around saving 20 gigawatts of solar or other renewable energy assets every year, right? And powering equivalent number of homes or sequestering so much CO2 rather than putting up new solar plants. So that becomes our core goal, and we really hope to be able to achieve it. And thanks to our partners, thanks to everyone involved in our journey, we are also on track to do that as one of the largest firms across the globe trying to do this. And we're doing this across all the 5 continents, right? So that's a quick peek into our journey. So thank you so much for your time, and happy to get into Q&A.
Wow, those are huge numbers, Aditya. 2 terawatts. Yeah, that's just massive. And we're only in 2021. We've been screaming and shouting that this is the decade of climate action. We've got only the next 4, 5, 6 years to solve our climate crisis, whether it's the waste problem, the carbon problem, the water problem. Your contribution on 2 terawatts net, I think that's a huge piece of the puzzle too. So we need a lot more AirProbes out there. And hopefully we can collectively instigate a lot more AirProbes we created, right? Pun intended, climate instigators is a term that's floated out there very commonly now. So I'm going to do this Q&A in a slightly more interesting fashion than we normally do. But before I dive in there, this is clearly a very interesting use of drone applications, right? How do you feel about the new liberalized drone policy that's come out and how it can be extended into more sustainability solutions? Because it almost never shows up in, apart from solar inspection, what other use cases could actually leverage drone applications and drone technology?
Right, absolutely. So thanks for that question. So yeah, I think in terms of India liberalizing the rules, The first thing which we see is a lot of young folks who are into this community, right? So in the drone industry, which is a fairly new industry, we see a lot of young folks working. And I think it really helps them get motivated towards building solutions for some of the tougher problems. So why did solar make sense was the simple picture which I put up saying so far, right? These are huge infrastructures, and having drones is like the most logical way to be able to solve this particular problem. But with new drone rules, especially, there is something called as beyond line of sight, which would come into play eventually, which basically means you do not have to look at the drones you fly. They can fly autonomously wherever they need, as long as safety considerations are taken into play. And that can lead to big impact. One of the areas which I see is in agriculture, where you would use this data to be able to predict yield, predict issues in terms of pesticides, where to spray, where do you have diseases, build insurance product, build loaning products, etc., in combination with satellite data and also ground sensors, right? So I wouldn't see drones as an isolated way. I think a lot of these technologies eventually, intertwine to be able to bring out the necessary solution and impact at the end of the day. So I think that's a big area. Like I told, another area which is already ripe and doing pretty well across the world is looking at wind inspections and other energy assets, because there's a lot of loss in transmission distribution, and these are critical infrastructure, right? Even if, let's say, one of your transmission line is out, the energy just doesn't come through. There's no point in being able to produce it. So I think what becomes very important with such infrastructure projects is to be able to maintain them, because these projects go on for 25 years. You have a contract return for 25 years and you're fined if you're not able to produce it quite a lot of times. So I think drones would become more and more normal in quite a lot of these infrastructure plays and place which involves a lot of area where remote sensing data is helpful. And we've also seen on the adaptation side, apart from agriculture, we've seen that in West Bengal there were a few cyclones, and drones were immediately deployed to identify damage, to issue insurance to these homeowners, to issue insurance to these business owners, essentially. So I think the usage is just going to keep going higher, especially with regulations being so much more liberalized and government clearly giving a big focus on being able to manufacture in India and also build out the services industry in India, right? So yeah, I think the future is really bright for remote sensing technology.
I'm a big proponent for drones myself from my ex-aerospace career, and I feel like it's not leveraged enough in the sustainability space. So if somebody were to reach out, they could come across to you and say, hey, like, you've done this in the past, how could I also apply it in my use case, right?
Absolutely.
Great. Awesome. What do you think is the role of a community like SusMafia in a climate tech entrepreneur's life? What should it be?
So I think it's huge, right? The potential is huge. Honestly, I think it's about how we probably leverage it at the end of the day, which probably was not high, but with increasing activity, I think it's just going to continue increasing, right? So I think, like I put up the last few points in my presentation, which I felt was very important and could have saved me a lot of time initially, was, I think, just understanding the whole space and understanding how emerging technology or technology really comes into play is not an easy task. It takes up a lot of time to be just able to understand the space, understand what solutions make sense, etc. And just to have a few entrepreneurs who are willing to share their experience, willing to lend their time, or even other community members, right from investors, the soldatos, essentially, like with all the work they put in, right? I think it's so important in terms of the life cycle across exploring ideas which you probably want to look in. Like, you just attend a SusTalk, you understand what something's happening in a domain, and you probably get a parallel idea, like it could start right from there. To, I think, finally to scale up quite a lot of things, right? Like, this is a great platform to get the visibility. We have TEDx events coming. I think that's a huge platform, right, for anyone to get the visibility and reach out there. And also with, I think, the Corporado program. Honestly, I think if we clearly see our solution fitting into the bill for these, I think that's a beautifully designed program to bring out multiple solutions together and to be able to offer it to eventual customers. I think that's such a beautiful way, because I'll tell you a personal story there, right? One of the biggest problems for us when we had to go international and sell was, we are a bootstrap business. So we are profitable, we pump in the same money, and then we try building our business better. And the cost of customer acquisition for us was so high when we went out that we had to take so much more time to be able to do the same. That's why I say we took 3 years to get to 22 gigawatts. And now every year we'd be doing 22, 25, 30 gigawatts, right? So what if that could be done in the first year itself? Because I think the amount of time we have to really tackle this problem of climate change is low. And I think the number of people we need to succeed in able to do this, I think, is massively high. So I think a central organization which provides the community, the people who are inspired, who could probably join in on these journeys, and to probably help in terms of go to market, I think has a massive impact. So that's where the points which I wrote for my personal vision, I think I hope to work a lot more with SusMafia in terms of being able to bring that in.
Great. I think that's exactly what we want to build. We have a lot of people from SusMafia here. We have, a lot of our team also here. If we can build that organization, that would become a good foundation for other entrepreneurs to stand upon and say, hey, I don't want to reinvent the wheel. We stand on this and then go to market faster, right? And scale up faster. That would be amazing. So we need all the help to build that organization as well. So your ideas would be very, very valuable there. Which brings me into the next question. What are your specific asks, Aditya Bhat from AirProbe, right? What would help AirProbe? What would help Aditya Bhat? What can other mafiosos do for you?
Right. So I think the first single thing is, I think obviously customers matter a lot for us at the end of the day as a business. So I think any sort of leverage in terms of identifying the right kind of customers, we're looking at a global audience. We're already present across 5 continents in different countries, but it's still a constant battle to be able to be present versus to really be able to provide the solution to every single solar plant out there, right? Which is what we eventually want to be. So I think any sort of connections with respect to that goes a long way in terms of the business itself, right? And two, I think we do have quite a lot of questions and we're looking for partners and mafiosos where they think their solution sort of can work with our solution because we don't want to reinvent the wheel again. So we see that there's a large problem in this particular area of solar and renewables with respect to data, in terms of the services you can provide after leveraging the data, be it financial products for insurance, for loans, whatever it is, be it for acquiring some of these assets or being able to provide some of the operational support, right? I think we are very open towards exploring these collaborations and offer a more holistic solution to our customers so that we can solve the problem ASAP for them. I think that is something we're looking at. And the last one is more of a curiosity and I think an ask which would help in the long term, which is we are continuously exploring at new domains where technology like ours can fit in, right? And where it can create significant impact. So I think if anyone sees leverage of what we do in terms of things they work on, I'd love to have a chat, see how we can partner up and then go to the market if possible, right? So these would be some immediate action points. Great.
So international market, new customers, and combining solutions to go to market more effectively. Right?
Yeah.
Because a lot of sustainable solutions can really be bundled.
Yeah.
Right. What are your gifts to other mafiosos? What do you feel like? Drones, advice on how to leverage drones is of course one, but what more would you feel really comfortable advising other mafiosos on?
Sure. I think anything to do with companies who'd want to work in the solar domain. I think we have a big network of customers locally and globally, and I think we'd be more than happy to support you, get in touch with some of them. If you want to experiment a few ideas, if you want to sell your solutions or anything else, right? Just get into conversations to explore a few things. So I think we'd be more than happy to help leverage the network which we've built globally, which I hope will really help them scale faster. I think that's point one. And I think some bit of advice, although I don't think I'm overly qualified in doing this, but emerging tech is a different kind of problem and a different beast in some of these solutions because the market itself is evolving. And two, I think the tech itself is evolving, right? So eventually that's a different kind of problem to face when you're building a startup, right? So I'd be more than happy to share our learnings and mistakes, which we have probably done across the journey, which can hopefully help our, members essentially. So these would be two immediate things I can think of. And if someone's looking at, just to give a quick brief of our customers, these are large solar PV plants, owners essentially. They're backed by big PE funds essentially. So even if you think those connections would help and speaking to relevant PE members might help, I think you're one hop away from them, because most of our customers directly have worked in PEs or are currently working with some of these big PEs. So if you're in the infrastructure domain and want to get in there, happy to make that connection.
Fantastic. One big idea that you hope to have achieved by 2030, what would have created a cleaner, fairer, fairer future for all of us? And if that would have happened, it would make you extremely happy.
Right. No, so I think I've spoken to you a bit about this also with Hari, right? I really hope that apart from scaling our solutions with our focus area, I really believe that to be able to solve this climate crisis, we need more and more people working on it. We need them to be working on certain profitable businesses, which hopefully can grow, and then they can build in a lot more people, a lot more money into the domain to build much more, right? So I think one of the big things for me, which I hope to achieve by 2030, is be a active part of community, both within the organization, external to that, where I think we can hopefully open source a lot of knowledge, hopefully connect, make the market access a lot more easier, and help building a lot more climate initiatives, right? And be a very big active part of it. Because I do not personally think that we can solve this individually. I think we'll have to really look at this whole domain and business area as not so competitive. While there is good business competition, I think it's very important to encourage more people to get into the domain itself and making sure that they work. So I think this community piece is a very big piece. And over there, I personally see I'm investing a lot of time in terms of looking at certain focus areas which can create the most impact going ahead, which could be a combination of technology and the eventual impact, which is one of my strong spots. So I think, yeah, my personal vision is to hopefully have a lot more people in a community work towards this, where we can hopefully open source a few things, collaborate and cooperate, right? And build a lot more climate companies being able to achieve this, right?
Awesome.
So yeah, in brief, I would say that would be the vision for 2030.
That's beautiful. And then the next section is really quick. So line on each. I've put out some influencers out here from different sections of society. What would you advise them? So none of them are really from the climate space, but they have massive influence in society. And if they were to become, agents of change and evangelists for climate, what would they tell their followers, right? So what would you tell Mr. Modi from the policy side?
Anirudh, so sorry, I just missed it. There was a glitch in my internet.
Yeah.
Can you please repeat? Yeah.
Yeah, so here are 5 influencers in society from different sections of society. They all have their massive following. If they could be evangelists for your big idea and for climate, what would you tell Mr. Modi? What would he be? What should he be propagating to his followers?
Right. So just going with the same narrative, I would say, I think one of the things which I personally feel Mr. Modi has been doing very well is to build up campaigns and to create a huge following for each of these campaigns, in very creative ways. So I think just making sure that climate change and working towards solving this issue in some of the ways which we've mentioned is a very big part of it. So we have this Make in India scheme, we have the new PLI schemes for a lot of industries. I think similar things for the entire industry within climate change, and not just renewable energy, because there has been quite a lot of focus there. There has been money being pushed over there, I think becomes important. So my single advice would be to hopefully create a campaign which would lead to, a broader thing rather than just focus on renewable energy, and push in a lot of incentives and money in that direction. Because that's one thing which, as a prime minister, I think Mr. Modi has done really well, right? So I think that would be my advice.
Policy and mass market appeal, right?
Exactly, to make sure it's friendly. So currently, India is the third most, interesting market for renewable energy across the world with respect to policy. And this is despite the challenges in DISCOM, despite the challenges in core taking away these tariffs, etc. Right? That is what we have been able to create after China and the US. So I do think just working on that policy level and making sure there is core focus on this entire domain and not just on renewables, which I think has been in the focus for quite a while, is pretty important. And that
now electric mobility too. I think that's the second big one.
Yeah.
And biofuels, right? So
Yeah.
renewables, electric mobility, and biofuels. But what about the rest?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And also India being in a place where climate adaptation is so important, I think it becomes important to speak about that as well.
Yeah. So now from the industrialist lens, right? From a big corporate house, Anand Mahindra.
I think I'm too small to advise because I think they've already been doing so much, right? Like in the whole thing, like Mahindra is one of the largest groups in renewables. They're hopefully going to be a big player in the EV space. So I think my simple advice, which I already think they're doing, is to pump in a lot more interest, money, and ecosystem in this whole domain, which I think they're actively doing very well, right? Including retweeting quite a lot of interesting solutions, etc., which brings a lot of encouragement into the domain for people like us. So I think I just repeat that advice to make sure there is more emphasis and create an ecosystem where we can bring out these climate innovation, hopefully bring out more and more money outside of the Mahindra Group as well into these innovations and to make sure we build the entire ecosystem. That would be my advice.
Their chief sustainability officer is also a TEDx speaker at our event next week, Mr. Ghosh. So
nice.
Yeah, hopefully your advice reaches him. All right. I don't know if you know who this is. Do you?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I do it.
So Bhumi Pednekar as an actress, climate warrior, massive following. What should the film industry be propagating?
Yeah, I think one of the big things which I've seen about films, right, and I've been always curious as a kid about films because the storytelling and the impact it has at the end on you is very big. And one of the big problems I have seen in us as human beings is, including myself, while I work on climate change, is somewhere we're a little hypocritical, right? Like we know it's a big problem, but I don't think we deal with it in the same way quite a lot of times, right? In our own personal choices, what we do. And one of the reasons why I think that is while we say it's a big problem, I do not think all of us understand and perceive how big a problem it is. And I think I would highly advise for people in the film industry to come out with more and more stories which could, constantly nudge us towards understanding what the real challenge we face, right? What are the ways to really get there? Which I think a lot of people in film industry are doing through their personal posts, but I think they're great at storytelling. And I think we need more and more of that for the general public to be more aware and more cautious in the way they act and hopefully, adapt to changes which are required. So yeah, that would be my advice.
Compelling storytelling, right? Very, very important piece of the puzzle. And it actually goes into the next one too. Shekhar Gupta representing journalism over here. What should journalists be propagating?
Yeah, I would say something similar, right? Because they're a big part of storytelling, honestly, and factful storytelling, hopefully, right? So I think we need a lot more data points around these things, a lot more stories around like, climate companies, climate campaigns, essentially, not just companies, because we need like all sectors doing really well to be able to do it. So I think just emphasis on that and compelling storytelling is what I would repeat.
Fantastic. And the second last one, PV Sindhu as a sports personality. Can that also be a part of the debate and the movement in climate?
I think everyone has to, right? Anyone who has a voice and who's probably aware about it, they have such massive following and such influence on people that I think just supporting a few companies, like simple initiatives where we've seen some celebrities probably put in money in some climate tech startups, just making sure they speak about it, just making sure they represent some brands over others. I think that speaks a ton about it, right? So I think if we are able to create an ecosystem and reach out to people like these with massive following, right, and with credibility to a certain degree, I think that's going to create a large impact in making sure people are more aware and act based on that awareness.
It's such an interesting point. If you get one of these personalities to become an angel investor, let's say in your first round or second round, the level of cultural change that occurs in their own following is huge. Like Aditya Bhat, for example, invested into Fool the other day.
Yeah.
And everybody was like, oh my God, we're only going to consume like sustainable fragrances now. Right. So that's the level of influence that happens by having one of these people, even just be an investor.
Exactly.
Right? Even screaming and shouting about it. So maybe that's a good piece of advice. Look for these personalities to become investors, because then they will talk about it a lot more too.
Exactly. And it's not limited to just your solution or company, right? I think it brings a big change into entire ecosystem.
Yeah.
And the other thing is, you probably saw a few, actors probably put in money initially from the last 3-4 years, but then now you see that increasing. That is the change which we need, right? So I think just one of them taking the step really helps bring in a lot more people, both from awareness perspective and also in terms of monetization and flag bearer perspective as well.
Totally. And the last one, what would you tell the next mafioso to join the community?
Yeah, no, I think I would just say one thing which I couldn't do for a while and which I'm doing right now, which is to be a lot more active in the Mafia activities, honestly. I think there's so much to leverage once we start adding value to the Mafia in general, right? So I think anyone who's joining right now, I think it's very important to make sure we converse, make sure we, understand about each other's journeys. We converse about how we can help each other, because I think a lot of people within the Mafia are very giving. I think they care about the overall purpose. They want to make sure everyone succeeds. And I know, like, you guys as directors are making sure we build a community in that particular way, right? So a simple advice is to take out whatever time we have, even if it's, let's say, 10 minutes a week, 5 minutes a week, and to make sure there is constant interaction, constant give and take in the Mafia, which I hope to basically take up first. And that's what I would hope the next mafioso takes up.
So good. Thanks. Thanks for your words. I will end right there, but now it's open for audience Q&A. So we could start with Vijay Prateek's question. Would it make sense to utilize your drones in detection of methane and probably even CO2 leakages in various types of oil and gas infra? There's a huge amount of leakages in the industry, and this could help us push cleaner energy infra instead. And anybody else who has a question, please drop it.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. No, I think that's an idea which we do see some companies working on in the West, especially with a lot of natural gas in industrial environments, especially for methane detection. So I think that's a big use case going ahead for drones. So anything to do with pipelines, pipeline inspection, even for oil spills, we see drones being used quite a bit. And I think we're just like waiting for drones as moving sensors to take off, right, in some of these domains. And the other thing why it's an important sector is it makes immediate economical sense, honestly, in a big way, because these are spread out infrastructures. These infrastructures, the losses at that source is high. And also, like you told, I think the impact of making sure that we make existing infrastructures which probably pollute slightly cleaner is also very important, because the scale at which these infrastructures are deployed is so huge, right? The percentage of renewables, for example, in India right now, solar, I think, is 10% across India. We have like close to 30% of renewables, if I'm right, and remaining is all the other infrastructure. So I think we should start parallelly from all sides, and this is a great application. So thank you for indicating that application.
Great. Chandra of Vatsan Envirotech is saying, Aditya, I want to discuss 1-on-1-2 opportunities. He's also in SusMafia, so just get in touch right after this. Arjun is saying he can introduce you to the SemCorp MD, if that's helpful for you.
Perfect.
And Deva wants to ask a question. Deva, would you like to unmute? Deva still here?
Yeah, we can see him, but I think he's fixing his mic.
Okay. Anybody else who has a question, please drop it in the chat box. I can just call out on you. Yes, Mr. Khatri, I see your hand.
Aditya, first of all, that presentation was wow. And I'm saying this because I've been working on renewable energy since 1988. And I had the opportunity of being CII to drive this for 1 year. But having said this, some inputs for you when you showed us the first slide of that huge acreage of solar. And I always believe that these sites are under-leveraged. For example, the opportunity which exists under the solar panels is how do we put ground-hugging plants which don't disrupt the power production? And you also mentioned that you have flooding issues. So while designing these places, how do you ensure that the water, the hydrology is understood? And then if it's prone to flooding, then how do you design so that the flooding can be reduced by rainwater harvesting? Because in India, a lot of focus is given to energy, but very little attention is being given to water. And the synergistic impact of water and climate change will be really horrific, and COVID will look like a picnic. So your thoughts on the usage of land and water management?
Absolutely, sir. No, I completely agree with you. I think we are honestly looking at the phase of industry, right? In fact, till now, we had a very difficult time even looking at our solution, which directly gave close to a percentage of saving, and the reason that is it's still comparatively a new industry, right? We started a big uprise in terms of installation from 2017, 2018. And I think a lot of focus currently for people who deploy, right, the solar plants essentially is on building more and more solar energy assets, the way it is structured. But eventually where it is moving towards, and we have seen a lot of POCs around this, is how do we make sure that we use this entire infrastructure, which also includes the land, in terms of multiple other use cases, also to increase multiple other revenue sources from a business sense, simple business sense, nothing related to impact, right? So I have already seen in Europe, where the assets are, let's say, 8 years old, 10 years old, a lot of experiments around agriculture, right, in the same land. We've also seen, I'm not sure if you've heard from Ravi from Dexter Labs in the presentation, I think even as part of his talk last time, where they've experimented on having, plants essentially and agriculture behind these structures, which are these, steel structures essentially, where they hang it and it's managed in the best way possible. It also has an effect of cooling from the research which we've been able to read, which sort of helps in better performance of solar PV panels as well, right? So I think that's a very important way to take things ahead. With respect to flooding, I think that has become a very important part in industry to focus on right now, because we ourselves have seen both in India and in other countries where complete assets have been submerged, panels have been taken off due to winds, etc. Because there's no trees around. It's basically, dry land with nothing around, right? So there's a lot of soil erosion. There's a lot of focus on that as we learn more. And I'm sure the industry is looking to solve that. Another big use case I've seen is recently Acme became the first developer in India for also producing green ammonia, right? And they built a ammonia plant and also hydrogen plant right beside their solar plant in the same location I showed. So I think that there is a lot of increasing use cases for using this infrastructure and land available. One, in terms of increasing revenue opportunities, because as the tariff falls, you need to be innovative in being able to make it profitable as overall infrastructure. And because we are in a domain like renewables and working towards climate change, I think there is that increasing commitment, awareness towards building more and more impactful solution utilizing the same infrastructure, right? So I completely agree with you. And I hope it is a matter of time that some of these solutions come up and not intent, because till now, I think a lot of bandwidth was being spent on increasing the amount of capacity, which will continue to do so, because the challenge for renewables is we still do not have enough people to work in this domain. We need a lot more people coming in, right from executives, financial folks to technicians on site. To be able to meet up with this demand. So I think we'll have to see how the industry adapts with doing their basic purpose of installing and maintaining these assets, and then also leveraging it for multiple different use cases, right? So I think we're just waiting for that time. And those are my thoughts.
Two quick inputs, Aditya. I'll introduce you to the CEO of Skills Council for Green Jobs, because it's their mandate to train people in renewables. And we have trained about 20,000 people already and got them jobs in the wind sector. So that's number one. And number two, you talked about soil erosion. the quick suggestion to you is that I don't know if you've heard of vetiver grass. If you can plant vetiver grass around this periphery of this place, then you can reduce that to a certain extent. And on vetiver, there are so many co-benefits. I'll talk to you one-to-one. I hope Ganesh or somebody will SMS me your cell number and we'll have a long chat.
Sure, sir, definitely. I'll keep in touch. Thank you so much for the inputs, though.
Welcome.
Thanks, Mr. Khatri. We are at time, but we'll go 5 minutes over. In fact, we have a second session after this, which is how to go viral in a pandemic, which is more of a TEDx presentation prep session, but we'll take another 5 minutes. There's a couple more questions too.
So,
yeah,
can I
Dave.
ask a question? Yeah, Aditya, it was a great presentation, and I'm really impressed how your clarity is growing over the days. It's great. Are you able to hear me? Are you able to hear me? Okay. Yeah. So one question that I want to ask Aditya is that this the whole climate change. Either you need hardware infrastructure or a behavioral change to make a real impact. Not just with the software, like say, for instance, Google could just build a search engine because all the underlying, the internet and the computing and the network was already available, right? I mean, it was easy for a software company to build, scale, and become a unicorn. Whereas many of these climate tech, the lower layers are not available for a software play, pure AI or IoT play kind of stuff, right? So can you comment on that? I mean, how can because like right now, IBM has announced that, they are going to start climate tech technologies using AI, similarly, Microsoft announced. All these guys are getting into the fray. In this case, how can a startup come in and become successful?
Right. So thank you so much for that question and also the input, Deva. Appreciate that you've seen us close enough to actually comment on that. And I do agree with you, right? We've had some of these conversations before. I think broadly right now where we are, quite a lot of changes which we need at scale seem like big infrastructure plays, right? Especially for businesses. It is about making sure energy is greener and cleaner. It is about making sure that your manufacturing is cleaner and cleaner, right? Your transport is greener and cleaner, right? So a lot of these are infrastructure related projects, and that's how we would evolve. At the same time, I would just point out that while today some of these sectors of green infrastructure, which is basically what you indicated as the hardware for us to probably build something else on top of, right? To make sure they're efficient, to make sure software solutions are relevant in order for us tackling climate change. What we do have to look at is with increasing focus, better policies, and more money coming up, the amount of infrastructure is not scaling in a really linear way. It is growing in a pretty exponential way, right? And I would hope that it continues to do so. And that's where I think a lot of these solutions come into play, right? Especially the software part where they can have a big scale. Just as we showed something which indicated our numbers, today we just inspect 22 gigawatts, out of which, let's say there's just 300 megawatts of saving, although it's not just, but it's still just when you look at the broader scheme of things. But I think when we look at a world with a couple of terawatts or more than that, I think these things become pretty significant. So I would just say that while it is a challenge being a startup where the market probably is not big enough, or let's say the time taken to be able for this to be able to applicable and for it to bring real impact and monetary impact is higher. The way we have been able to tackle it is to partner up with a few close customers where we start focusing on some of these future problems right now, and hopefully scale with them as they scale up this hardware or infrastructure, right? So that's how we as a startup whose expertise was with technology and software looked at it. It seems to be working okay for us, not in the best sense, but I think it's working okay for us. And I think one of the other ways is to grow horizontal across verticals, right, if possible, which could be a good way to tackle this problem. And that comes with its own problems, as you indicated. But that would be my first few thoughts around this. While I admit that infrastructure is the big thing right now, I do think in upcoming times, some of these solutions would really matter a lot and would give the economic returns it needs to.
Yeah, I mean, the point I also wanted to indicate, right? I was also a
Sorry.
software entrepreneur.
Correct. Do a time check. Just because you're going into the next session, can I ask you guys to take this offline?
Okay.
Yeah, and there's actually one more question from Shravan Kumar Mobius. Shravan, request you also to just send me your mail and I'll connect you with Aditya, and we can follow up with that so that we can ease into the next session, which is about the TEDx speakers now. But Aditya, thank you so much for a wonderful session. This has actually been so enlightening. This talk is, of course, going to go up on our YouTube. It'll be shared on the group. There'll be a lot of follow-up coming from this talk as well. Can't thank you enough for hosting. We hope.
Thank you so much, Anirudh. I had a really nice time finally.
You are one of the 100 climate unicorns being created through this decade. And we need 99 more to be created as well. So let's do it together.
Really. No, thank you so much. For sure. Let's do this together, right? I think my final point would be that I think we'll have to interact a lot more. Hopefully, a lot more people will be more active in Mafia, and I definitely will be, right? You've already seen it. So thank you so much for calling me to talk here, and all over to you, the next session. Thank you.
Amazing. Thanks.
Thank you, Aditya. Thank you, Anirudh.
Bye-bye. So we're now moving into the next session. So everyone who is here for how to be viral in a pandemic, the TEDx speaker presentation, guidelines on how to form your narrative, guidelines on how to record. Welcome to this session. The host for this is Ganesh, the co-director at SusMafia. Ganesh, over to you.
Thanks a lot, Anirudh. I mean, I'm just out of the story hearing from Aditya and being part of the story and hearing it today gives me chills, actually.